So we're back with some less than 60 miles here. This is the third scenario called Spearhead. I think I might have called it Spear Point at one point or another, but it's not, it's called Spearhead. And we've pushed on through to turn 11, the start of turn 11 out of 14. So we're midday on the second day, D plus 0, D plus 1, the midday turn. Just at the start of that. So the night turns on the track were pretty quiet. I'd made a decision with the Warsaw Pact that they would try and rest to recover some attrition points during the night. That went really poorly for them. They have about a 30% chance each time you make a roll for a unit. About a 30% chance to lose an attrition point if they meet the requirements of resting. I made about 20 rolls through the night for various units, and I think I got 2 attrition back, so about a 10% return rather than a 30% return, so very disappointing there. And then we pushed on into day 2, and we've had 2, I think we've had 2 or 3, this will be the third daylight turn. And, you know, the Warsaw Pact get penalties, or anyone gets penalties for attacking in the night, and that plus the doubled movement costs for, you know, any terrain other than roads and so on, made it very sensible to try and rest up at night, which is a pretty cool piece of mechanics. They've now had 2 daylight turns, and you can see the Warsaw Pact units pressed hard up against the NATO forces, and this is getting a bit dicey for the Americans. So up here the Americans are holding out. They haven't really faced a lot of attacks yet, but they've got combat units under that defensive marker. And they've got an armoured unit up above it, they've got artillery in behind, they've got another armoured there, they've got infantry there, and they've got a strong infantry unit dug in here in the centre in a town. And a lot of these Warsaw Pact units are the ones that had failed to rest and not knocked off any of their attrition, and they are pretty much spent. They're not in a very good state at all. I think this one's taken 3 attrition, this one's taken 3 attrition. So although this looks dangerous, a lot of these units aren't in peak fighting condition. Where the problems start is here. The Americans just had an HQ wiped out from in here, and this artillery unit just took 4 attrition or 3 attrition hits because it was it failed to disengage, and it's now facing being wiped out by this mech unit. Then you've got a 9-6 armour unit here ready to plough into some helicopters. You've got more 9-6 armour here bullying their way through just this sort of recon unit, and this 5-4 armour here, and it's all a bit unpleasant. The line is in danger of crumbling down in this area, and this division is in danger of forcing its way through into this empty space here, where it would then just be facing a bit of artillery, and it would be into the victory hexes. So with 4 turns to go, the Warsaw Pact's best hope is to push through down here and force its way onto this highway where it earns the big bucks. And the American force looks like it's overcommitted to its defence up along this highway, fearing a late strike along there from a division that it wasn't paying attention to. It's overcommitted up there and actually not got enough down here to effectively stop this, and it's going to be very harem scarum from here on in to see if they can hold out. So that's the situation. We've got 4 turns to go, and the Warsaw Pact really starting to push into you know, support units and you know, just crap that they can just blow through and wipe out. And the Americans don't have a strong, well-formed line anymore. They've got a good defensive structure up here and a very poor one down here. both sides starting to run out of the kind of resources they need in terms of, you know, artillery assets. I mean, there's artillery back here, but I think he's got, you know, he's got what, 4 attrition on him, so he's got 1 shot and then he's done. You know, so a lot of the artillery's spent. The choppers are kind of one use, and they've taken some anti-aircraft fire. And so yeah, we're starting to run out of resources to throw support in various places along the line. So it's still tense, still difficult, and still really enjoyable. This is proven to be a really good game. It's been quite a bit of a struggle because of the break. I had to go away, so it was quite hard to play it and learn it and get a few turns in and then go away for such a long time and come back and try and, you know, remember how to play and remember what's happening and get interested in it again, and get motivated to play it again. And that sort of, you know, lack of motivation or coincided with some night turns when there wasn't really a lot happening and it was very hard to make progress. Now I've pushed through into the second day and we've got some proper action going in. I'm back into it in full swing, and it's really good fun. So I'm not doing that much more. I reckon this will be the last video on it, because I think we'll just, you know, rattle through a couple more turns and see where we're at and see if we've got a winner. Less than 60 miles by Thin Red Line Games here. I've just finished the 3 p.m. turn on the second day, so if we come down here onto the turn track, D+1, 3 p.m. turn, which means that we should have 2 turns to go. And at this point you can start looking at, you know, victory conditions and situations and seeing whether there's anything left to play for. You can see the blue cubes, which are the 50-point hexes that the Warsaw Pact were trying to reach, and they made a really significant breakthrough here. But even so, even though it's just artillery and an HQ and stuff in the way, with 2 turns left, there's not enough movement points to get through all this stuff and cross these rivers and bridges and stuff to get to that hex. Even if it was clear 2 turns of movement from this unit, wouldn't get it there, I don't think. Might just get it there, but with combat to have to conduct, no way. And that's the easiest route that they might have to a blue cube. The more difficult route's been going through combat units, you know, or maybe trying to punch through this artillery, but then there's a full strength infantry battalion here which is dug in defensive terrain and is blocking, so they can just march past it and so on. So in terms of reaching the blue cubes, it's all over. The Warsaw Pact have done pretty well, like I say, big breakthrough here, and we're working their way round past the defences up here and threatening to push along the road. But this all went far too slowly. I should have just brought it on without those silly divisional orders and used the command points for something more productive. Anyway, it was an interesting, if failed, experiment, but interesting to try it nonetheless, to see whether that was the more efficient way, or whether I should have just set them up in the orders they wanted and brought them on, and then used the command points more effectively elsewhere. Yeah. So then I had a look at the overall situation for victory points as we stand, and the Warsaw Pact need 51, I think, 50 for a decisive victory, 51, and they're currently on 54 or thereabouts. It's quite hard to tot up the victory points because this map isn't very clear. This was a sort of photocopied, a printout of a map that the designer later produced so that you could see visually. Otherwise you just get a list of locations with the victory point totals, and it's really hard to see what they are, but you can see 2 points there, 3 there, 3 there, 4 there. So that's 14 points for this stretch of road. You don't. Again, you have to be careful because I think these are off the northern edge of the playable area. But for just coming along this road here, that's 14 points. And if we go back to the map, that's this stretch of road along here to Alsfeld, and they've taken that. So that's 14 points. You can see another from Fulda, you can see another 2, 5, 9, 14 points down to here. And again, that's all gone. Fulda's gone and all this road has gone. And although that particular 5-point hex there hasn't gone, it's pretty much impossible to stop this armoured unit from taking it. So the only way to do that would be to move this artillery out of the way into it, and that would leave the route open to the blue cube, which would, so let's say it's not going to happen, that the armour is going to take that in the absence of anything to stop it. So there's another bunch of points, and then you can see through the centre here from Fulda you've got another 3 points for that airfield, 4 points up here, 4 points there, that's another 11 points. And the Fulda's gone, the airfield's gone, the hex up here is gone, this area here has been taken. So that all adds up to about 39 points, and then the NATO casualties over here, 2 chopper units, an artillery, an armour and armoured recon, that's another 15 points, and it's a decisive Warsaw Pact victory. At which point, you know, without the blue cubes to play for, and without any real counter-attacking play that the NATO forces have at the moment, it's pretty much all over. So that has been the Spearhead scenario, scenario 3 from less than 60 miles. I am still really infatuated with this game. It's a very, very nice, granular operational game. There are elements of it, I think there's maybe perhaps one element of it, the helicopters, the way the helicopters work, that I'm not super sold on. And the reason for that is, if we went into it a bit, every time your artillery fires, they have to take an attrition hit. So, you know, firing combat support from an artillery unit, whatever its type, is an attrition hit. And helicopters fly into combat, use their fuel and ammo, you know, use their fatigue on their pilots and their ground crews, have to do, you know, refits and have to do maintenance and refueling and rearming, and that doesn't cost any attrition at all. They can fly. What they do have to do is flip, so you can only use them once per phase. So a bit like the Next War series, when you use a chopper, once it's used in a phase, in a movement phase, it has to flip, and you can't use it more than once. But what that tends to mean is that they're just still flying perfectly well after all this time. You can see this guy's got, what, 1 attrition hit on him. 1 attrition hit. I've played 14, 13, 14, 13, 12 turns. He's got 1 attrition. So he's essentially as combat ready as he was, you know, 20 hours, 40 hours ago or whatever, and he's been flying combat missions. One of the problems one of the ways in which this sort of invulnerability is compounded for helicopters is the fact that they never take they never take air-to-air fire on more than the 1 to 2 table, which means that you only ever hit them on an 8, 9 or 10, you've got a 30% chance of affecting them with anti-air fire, because they can halve the anti-air against them with flying nap of the earth, which is -3 range, but it halves anti-air. So even if you're flying into a hex with 2 enemy units, you've got 4 anti-air against you, and you halve it by flying nap of the earth, and you're on this 1 to 2 table. Even more quirky, I won't say it's wrong, but quirky, is that, let's say this American recon unit is trying to disengage. We fly our choppers in support of that disengagement. We don't take anti-aircraft fire at all. The rules say that the anti-aircraft fire you take is 2 points per. Is it what? 2 points for a unit in the attacking hex. I think it is the exact rule. And yeah, here we go. During ground combat, AA value is calculated as follows: 2 points, AA points for each enemy unit in the attacker or the defender hex. Well, I mean, there isn't an attacking hex because it's a disengagement attempt during the movement phase. And there's nothing said about that in any of the rules anywhere about whether it takes anti-aircraft fire, and if so, how much. But the anti-aircraft fire taken by helicopters is pretty much determined by the attacking hex. So if this guy was attacking into here and we flew our helicopters in ground support, nothing else around would get to anti-aircraft fire, only this guy, and like I say, it would only be 2 points, and if we wanted to, we could nap of the earth to change it to 1 point, or if there were 2 attacking units in there, we could change it to 1, and so on. You can only ever get 2 points of anti-aircraft fire into a helicopter, and it's just not enough to cause them meaningful levels of attrition over the course of a game, certainly of this length. The US helicopters got destroyed because they got caught on the ground by tanks overrunning them. So that's a different story. But in terms of actual flying ability, they are they're just pretty much invulnerable. I think these guys took a few hits, three attrition hits out of their 5. So you can see you can get some put on them, but it's not impacting whether they fly or not. It's not a decision to fly them or not. No, boom, they're done, they're going, and I just don't think that a rule quite works the way they work, which is interesting, but it feels like it's done to differentiate them from artillery, as in artillery fires as often as it likes but has to take the attrition, whereas helicopters only fly once but don't have to take the attrition, and so there's a clear differentiation between them. But I just don't see, in a game that's so focused on its simulation value, its simulative approach to a lot of things, that just seems like we've come up with 2 different mechanisms and we'll apply one to one and one to the other. And it could have been the other way round. That's the other thing that doesn't make any sense. You could say, well, no, artillery can only fire once but don't take the attrition, and that helicopters can fly as often that they like. They can keep running missions, but they have to take attrition each time. There's no I don't see any. You could apply the rationale either way, and I don't see how it would be any more valid for one than the other. So it's not the fact that they've done it that way, it's the fact that it's not consistent with how artillery and rockets and other things are handled. So I'd much prefer a system where, for example, you could choose whether to flip the helicopters and not take attrition, or keep them unflipped and take the point of attrition on them, and so that you could choose whether to fly them or not but keep racking up attrition on them, or just choose to expend them, keep them flying at a low level, flip them, and not take the point of attrition. I think that would give you more interesting decisions than this system, where they just seem to be a bit of an uber weapon that you just get to fly once. Other than that, and that is a very minor moan, I've talked about it because it's the only nitpicky thing I can find to really dislike. But that aside, I think the whole thing's brilliant. Just brilliant. I'm not sure I'm going to play the campaign game of this straight after, because I feel like I've been playing this for a while, and I have, and that's because I went on holiday for a couple of weeks and then it was very difficult to get back into, and so it's taken me some time then to play through the remainder of the game. But it is really, really good. I can't recommend it enough, and I think I'm likely to pick up more of this series as they come out. I don't think I will want to mash them together, which I think is the overall aim, is to have 5 of these and be able to turn it into some huge, stupid Western Europe 5-map mega game. I can't see myself doing that, and as you can see, my table's not big enough to do such things anyway. But a 1-mapper like this fits perfectly. A 2-mapper would fill the entirety of the table and would be something more of a struggle, but eminently doable. More than that, it's just a no-go, and just the amount of counters. I mean, this is the bigger of the scenarios, but I haven't even busted out the campaign game yet, and I think that's 30 turns, so that would be considerably more effort than this, and I'd have to stay as focused on it as I was for the first 5 or 6 turns of this before I went away. Let's just have a look. Campaign 1. Okay, you can play a short campaign that's 22 turns or a long campaign that's 38 turns. And yeah, I can see how over 38 turns, if you look at this guy and he's got, just one attrition on him, well, maybe he'd rack up some more. Maybe he got very lucky and maybe they'd rack up some more over the course of 38 turns. And likewise with this chopper down here, he's got 3. He might be in danger in another 5 or 6 turns. You don't know, do you? Still, I am where I am with helicopters, certainly in this situation. I think with the shorter games, if the attrition isn't actually going to produce any sort of limit on their ability to fly into combat, you might as well have another decision to make for them, which is interesting. But yeah, beyond that, really great stuff, interesting, a little bit fiddly, but I think you get a payoff for the fiddliness that is well worth it. So I've really enjoyed this Less Than 60 Miles. I'm not going to make, if I do play the campaign game, it's not going to be directly after this. It's time to move on to something else, and I doubt I'll film it, but I'm really looking forward to playing it.